Welcome the rare gems. Sometimes the proof that you've healed is not in how loud your joy sounds, but in how quietly you protect your peace. Have you ever paused and realized that you no longer react the same way you used to? That certain things or people that once disturbed your peace now barely touch your spirit? That quiet shift is what real healing looks like. It's not a grand moment or a sudden awakening. It's the subtle transformation that happens when pain no longer defines you. For the Sigma female, healing is deeply personal. She doesn't announce it, she embodies it. Her growth shows up in her calm responses, in her ability to walk away without resentment, and in how she chooses understanding over reaction. She stops trying to rewrite the past and starts learning from it. She no longer fights to be seen or heard. She simply stands rooted in her truth. Healing for her is not about forgetting what hurt her. It's about remembering it without pain. It's the strength to love again without fear and to exist in peace without needing permission. And the most powerful part, she often doesn't even realize she's healed because it has quietly become who she is. Stay with me until the end, because these 10 signs might just show you that your strength has been growing all along, even when you didn't notice it. Let's dive into it, the rare gems. Number 1. You're no longer waiting to be healed. There comes a point in a Sigma female's life when she stops chasing the idea of being completely healed. She realizes that healing is not a finish line she must cross, but a rhythm that moves with her through every season of her life. It is not something to be achieved once and for all, but something to be lived, breathed, and accepted. She no longer waits for the day when all her scars will fade, or when she will stop feeling the sting of what hurt her. Instead, she begins to understand that healing is not the absence of pain, but the growth that happens because of it. It is found in how she can now face her emotions without running from them, how she can sit with her discomfort and still choose peace. A Sigma female learns that healing has layers. One day she feels strong and unshakable, and the next a memory catches her off guard. But even then, she does not label it as failure. She has learned to see it as part of the rhythm. Just like a melody with soft and powerful notes, her healing flows in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes heavy, but always real. For example, she no longer blames herself for the relationships that fell apart or the people who couldn't meet her halfway. Instead of saying, "I'm still healing," she says, "I'm still becoming." That simple shift in mindset is where her power lies. She knows that growth doesn't always look graceful, but it's always meaningful. And so she rises again and again, not because she has fully healed, but because she has learned to live beautifully in the process. She no longer waits to be whole. She understands she already is. Her peace is no longer tied to perfection, but to acceptance, the quiet understanding that even the cracks in her soul have their own kind of light. Number 2. You've made peace with your parents' humanity. There comes a time in a Sigma female's journey when she stops waiting for her parents to say the words she always wanted to hear. The apology that never came no longer defines her peace. She begins to understand that her healing isn't tied to their regret, and that forgiveness doesn't always require an explanation. This realization doesn't happen overnight. It grows slowly, like dawn breaking through clouds after a long night. A Sigma female eventually learns to see her parents as humans first, not as perfect figures who failed her, but as wounded souls who were also shaped by pain, fear, and survival. She starts to recognize that they did the best they could with what they knew, even if their best left scars on her. It doesn't excuse their mistakes, but it gives her clarity. Instead of carrying resentment, she carries wisdom. For example, She remembers how her mother's silence used to make her feel unloved, but now she sees that her mother too was silenced by her own upbringing. Or how her father's harsh words once made her feel small, but now she realizes that he spoke from his own unhealed pain, not from truth. Making peace with their humanity doesn't mean pretending the pain didn't happen. It means she no longer allows it to control her. She no longer needs them to understand her story in order to heal from it. She understands that holding on to blame only keeps her connected to what once hurt her, while compassion sets her free. This shift is one of the deepest signs of emotional maturity. The Sigma female no longer craves a perfect family or a flawless past. She builds peace within herself instead. She understands that forgiveness is not for them, it's for her own freedom. And in that quiet acceptance, she finds a kind of strength that feels like grace. Number 3. You no longer romanticize suffering. There was a time when the Sigma female believed that pain was her power source. She thought her strength, her creativity, and her depth came from how much she could endure. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every lonely night felt like fuel for her evolution. She wore her scars like trophies, convinced that the more she suffered, the wiser she became. But eventually, something within her shifted. She began to see that constant pain is not a badge of honor. It's a weight. And carrying it for too long doesn't make you deep. It just makes you tired. The Sigma female reached a point where she realized she didn't have to keep bleeding just to feel alive. She no longer romanticized her suffering or called it growth when it was really self-destruction in disguise. Now she understands that real creation, real wisdom, and real power come from awareness, not wounds. Her ideas no longer need to be born from heartbreak. They can grow from peace, clarity, and presence. For example, instead of writing or creating only when she's broken, she creates because she's awake, because she's connected to truth, not pain. A Sigma female no longer glorifies struggle. She still acknowledges it, but she doesn't cling to it. She has learned that pain can be a teacher, but it's not meant to be a home. She lets it visit, learns what it came to teach her, and then releases it with grace. This doesn't make her soft, it makes her balanced. She knows that peace can be just as profound as pain, and calm can be just as powerful as chaos. Her strength now lies in how lightly she carries herself, not in how much she can endure. The Sigma female has outgrown the need to suffer for meaning. She creates from awareness now, because she finally understands that peace, too, is a masterpiece. Number 4. You find beauty in ordinary days. There was a time when the Sigma female believed her life needed to be extraordinary to have meaning. She thought fulfillment came from big dreams, constant motion, or some profound purpose waiting to be discovered. But as she healed, her perspective began to shift. She started to see that real beauty often hides in plain sight, in quiet mornings, in unspoken peace, in moments that most people rush past. Healing has softened her pace. The Sigma female no longer feels the pressure to chase something greater than herself. She understands now that peace is not found at the peak of a mountain, but in the calm of an ordinary day. It is in the way sunlight touches her skin, in the stillness of her room, or in the simple rhythm of her own breath. What once felt too simple now feels sacred. For example, she finds joy in brewing her morning coffee and watching the steam rise like a gentle reminder to slow down. She smiles at small things, a genuine laugh, a quiet walk, or a deep conversation that doesn't need to impress anyone. She no longer measures her life by milestones or applause, but by moments of calm she creates for herself. This change doesn't mean she stopped dreaming, it means she stopped running. She no longer chases meaning, she lives it. She realizes that being fully present is a kind of power few people master. The world may celebrate speed and ambition, but she celebrates stillness and awareness. The Sigma female has learned that ordinary days are not empty. They are full of quiet miracles. Every breath, every pause, every moment of awareness is enough. And in that realization, she finds a depth of beauty far beyond what she once thought life was supposed to look like. That is what true healing feels like. Peace disguised as simplicity. Number 5. You've confronted your shadow without running. There comes a moment in a Sigma female's journey when she stops pretending to be all light. She no longer hides behind the image of being calm, wise, or always in control. Instead, she turns around and faces what she once tried to bury: the envy that made her compare, the pride that made her distant, the anger she was taught to suppress. For the first time, she doesn't run from those parts of herself. She meets them, she listens. This is not easy work. Most people avoid their shadows because it is uncomfortable to see what lies underneath their polished selves. But the Sigma female has learned that the parts she hides are not her enemies. They are clues to her depth. When she finally confronted her shadow, she realized that her envy showed her what she truly desired. Her arrogance revealed where she once felt small. Her rage exposed the boundaries she kept allowing others to cross. Instead of purging these traits, she began to integrate them. For example, she no longer suppresses her anger. She channels it into drive, into purpose, into clear action. She no longer hates her jealousy. She uses it as a mirror, asking herself what part of her life needs more attention. Every dark piece became a teacher once she stopped labeling them as shameful. Facing her shadow gave her a new kind of power, not loud or aggressive, but deeply grounded. She now understands that light without darkness is incomplete. Her strength is not in pretending to be flawless, but in being whole. The Sigma female has learned that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to hold her contradictions with grace. She can now look in the mirror and see everything she is, the light, the dark, and everything in between, and finally say, "All of it belongs to me." That is what true self-acceptance looks like. Number 6. You can witness others' success without shrinking. There was a time when the Sigma female would quietly compare herself to others, wondering if she was doing enough, achieving enough, or becoming enough. Not because she was jealous, but because she held herself to impossible standards. Every time someone else succeeded, a small voice inside whispered that she was falling behind. But that voice no longer has power over her. Now she can watch others rise and genuinely celebrate them. She doesn't shrink or question her own path when someone else shines. The Sigma female has learned something most people never do. Another person's light doesn't dim her own. In fact, it reminds her that there is more than enough space for everyone to glow in their own way. For example, when a friend gets the promotion she wanted, or when someone else's work gains attention, she doesn't spiral into self-doubt. Instead, she smiles, knowing that her time and her version of success will unfold in its own rhythm. She understands that the world is not running out of opportunities. What is meant for her will never need to be taken from someone else. This mindset shift is what makes the Sigma female stand out. She no longer moves from scarcity, but from abundance. She doesn't compete for attention or validation because she knows her worth is rooted in authenticity, not in comparison. Watching others succeed now feels inspiring instead of intimidating. Their progress becomes proof that growth is possible for everyone, not a sign that she's behind. That peace, that quiet confidence is her power. The Sigma female has reached a level of emotional maturity that many never find. She no longer feels the need to rush, prove, or compare. She simply trusts her process, celebrates others on their journey, and continues building her own light, steady, patient, and unshakable. Number 7. You no longer use pain as your identity. There was a time when the Sigma female believed her pain was what made her special. She thought her strength and depth were born only from struggle, so she carried her wounds like proof that she had lived deeply. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every lonely night became a part of how she defined herself. Pain made her feel real. It made her feel alive. But as she grew, she realized something powerful. Pain is not identity, it's experience. Healing taught her that being deep doesn't require being damaged. She learned that she could be wise without being wounded, strong without being hardened, and kind without constantly bleeding for others. She stopped glorifying her suffering as a mark of authenticity. Her value no longer depends on how much she has endured, but on how gracefully she has transformed through it. For example, she no longer starts her story with what broke her. She talks instead about what she built from those broken pieces. She no longer feels the need to sit in sadness to create meaning. Now, her inspiration comes from clarity, from stillness, from joy that she once thought was too simple to be real. This shift changed everything. When the Sigma female stopped identifying with pain, she stopped attracting chaos. She no longer needed to be the one who always survives. She became the one who thrives. Her peace stopped feeling foreign and started feeling like home. Pain still visits her, but it no longer defines her. She can hold it gently, learn from it, and let it pass. The Sigma female has finally learned that depth is not measured by how much she has suffered, but by how fully she can love, live, and rise beyond it. And in that quiet realization, she discovers the most powerful truth of all. She no longer needs to hurt to feel alive. Number 8. Your emotions no longer own you. There was a time when the Sigma female's emotions ruled her world. When anger burned too long, sadness felt endless, and jealousy whispered lies that made her question her worth. She felt everything deeply, and that intensity often left her exhausted. But through growth and self-awareness, she discovered something extraordinary. Emotions are visitors, not masters. Now, when anger rises, she doesn't let it drive her decisions. When sadness comes, she doesn't sink into it. She sits with it, listens, and lets it pass. When jealousy appears, she doesn't shame herself for it. She looks deeper and asks what that feeling is trying to teach her. She has learned to observe her emotions like waves, acknowledging their movement without letting them pull her under. For example, when someone crosses her boundaries, she no longer reacts instantly or with rage. She takes a breath, collects her thoughts, and responds with clarity. That restraint is not suppression. It is power. The Sigma female understands that self-control is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to guide it. She has learned that emotions are messengers, not enemies. Anger can reveal where her values are violated. Sadness can remind her of what truly matters. Even jealousy can show her what she secretly desires. By naming her emotions instead of burying them, she takes back her power. This awareness is what sets her apart. She doesn't fight her emotions, she befriends them. She listens without letting them rule her life. The storms inside her no longer frighten her because she knows how to stand still in the rain. The Sigma female now lives with emotional mastery, not emotional chaos. She feels deeply, but she flows gracefully. Her emotions still visit, but they no longer own her. And in that quiet balance, she finds a strength that no chaos can shake. Number 9. You've stopped trying to prove your goodness. There was a time when the Sigma female's kindness was a performance she didn't even realize she was giving. She wanted to be seen as good, as selfless, as someone who always did the right thing. Her generosity often came with quiet exhaustion, and her compassion sometimes left her empty. She gave, not because others demanded it, but because she tied her worth to being the one who cared the most. But with time and growth, she began to see the difference between genuine kindness and performative goodness. She realized that true goodness doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to be clapped for or noticed. Real kindness flows from integrity, not from the desire to be admired. Now the Sigma female helps others without announcing it. She doesn't record her good deeds or look around to see who noticed. She finds peace in the quiet act itself. For example, she will help someone who once hurt her, not to prove her strength, but because bitterness no longer lives in her. She gives without expectation, not because she's trying to be seen as pure, but because it simply feels right. This shift changed how she moves through the world. She no longer bends over backward to prove she's a good person. She no longer apologizes for setting boundaries or saying no. She understands that being kind doesn't mean being available to everyone. Her goodness is no longer something she performs. It's something she lives. The Sigma female has learned that true virtue is silent. It is in the small gestures, in the quiet forgiveness, in the unseen acts of grace that never make it to the spotlight. She no longer seeks validation from others because her peace comes from knowing who she is when no one is watching. That is what makes her goodness powerful. It's pure, unforced, and deeply real. Number 10. You can hold two truths at once. There was a time when the Sigma female saw life in sharp contrasts. People were either right or wrong, moments were either blessings or lessons, and pain was something to escape, not understand. But as she grew wiser, she discovered that life is rarely that simple. Healing taught her how to hold two truths at once, how to say, "I was hurt, and I've grown," without feeling torn between the two. Now she no longer needs to divide her experiences into good or bad. She understands that even the moments that broke her also shaped her, that the same person who caused her pain may have also taught her strength. The same heartbreak that crushed her spirit opened her eyes to her worth. The Sigma female has learned to see the full picture, not just the parts that are easy to accept. For example, she can look back at a relationship that once wounded her and still admit that love existed there. She can acknowledge betrayal and still appreciate the lesson it brought. This doesn't mean she excuses what happened. It means she refuses to live in resentment. She allows complexity, and in doing so, she finds peace. Holding two truths at once has made her emotionally rich. She no longer clings to one story or one version of events. She allows life to be both painful and beautiful, unfair and meaningful, chaotic and divine, all at the same time. This balance is what makes the Sigma female extraordinary. She doesn't deny her emotions, but she doesn't drown in them either. She has learned that maturity is not about choosing one truth over another, but learning to sit with both without losing herself. Now she walks through life with softer eyes that see nuance, grace, and depth in everything. Because she finally understands that healing is not about rewriting her past, but about holding it with compassion and saying, "Both are true and both made me who I am." In final words, healing doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stop fighting battles that no longer deserve your energy. Have you ever noticed how peace sneaks up on you after years of chaos? How the things that used to break you now barely stir your emotions? That is healing. Not loud, not dramatic, but subtle and deeply freeing. For the Sigma female, healing is not about perfection or pretending to have it all figured out. It's about arriving at a point where she no longer reacts from pain, but from understanding. She no longer seeks closure from others because she's found it within herself. She no longer confuses peace with boredom because she has learned to find beauty in stillness. Her strength now lies in how calmly she walks away, how she protects her energy without guilt, and how she chooses love without losing herself in it. The Sigma female's healing story is not one of pretending to be unbothered. It's about mastering her emotions so completely that she no longer needs validation for her peace. She's learned to release control, to let life unfold without forcing it. And maybe that's the real sign of healing, when you can look back without bitterness, feel deeply without drowning, and move forward without fear. When your peace is no longer conditional, when your softness finally feels safe again. So if you've reached a place where your silence speaks louder than your pain, where you can bless what broke you and still smile, you've healed more than you realize. Thank you for watching The Rare Gems, and God bless you.